Hello, my name's Rich and welcome to the FPL tips video for Game Week 11. Just to timestamp this, I'm recording a bit later than I expected on Tuesday night because there's been a Reece James injury in the Champions League match. So I just wanted to redo a couple of stuff and add that as a tip as well. So we've got 4 different tips this week. I wanted to thank everyone for your comments last week. I've tried to try and improve things a little bit. Going to try and keep it concise. Going to show a few stats throughout the Fantasy Football Scout members area and just answer a few common questions. Now, it's a bit of a weird week because we've got this blank game week coming up in Game Week 12. So I don't think there's as much to discuss and we're kind of hampered a little bit by that. But I still think we've got some interesting talking points. First thing I wanted to touch on is going to be the suspension tightrope. So that's any players on 4 yellow cards. If they get a 5th yellow card, they're going to miss the next game. So worth paying attention to that. We're going to discuss the Liverpool assets as well. People are quite low on them, but they might be the best captain options for Game Week 12. Then we're going to discuss the Game Week 11 captaincy. I think a lot of people are going with just Haaland, but there could be some other options, or one in particular. And then, as mentioned, we've got the Reece James replacements as well. Following his injury, obviously that we might need some more news on that, but that's going to be the fourth and final tip for this game week. So let's get straight into it. So first of all, as I mentioned, the suspension tightrope. So there's several players that are on 4 yellow cards. Some of them are probably irrelevant for FPL, but some of them, we need to pay attention to. So the main one is Gabriel, and this is available. Go to Fantasy Football Scout. It's free. It's on the very first page. On the right-hand side, you'll be able to find this. But this is all the players on those 4 yellow cards. So the top one is Gabriel Jesus. We've known about this for a few weeks now. Obviously, he's got massive effective ownership. He was owned by a lot of people, but he's got that blank coming up in Game Week 12 as well. Jacob Ramsey, probably not as popular as he was last season when he was 4.5 million, but he's on it. Adam Smith of Bournemouth and Hickey of Brentford. I don't think anyone's got those. We've got Harrison Reed at Fulham, quite a popular 4.5 midfielder, although since wildcards have been popped, not quite as popular because people have gone for Pereira. We've got Tete at Fulham as well. We've got James Maddison. He's just appeared on this following his booking at the weekend. We got Dalot at Man United, and we got Steve Cook as well. So it's just worth paying attention to these. I think the real key ones are going to be Jesus and Maddison, and in particular Maddison. So I would urge caution with Maddison. There's a lot of other midfield options you can look at. So I wouldn't be bringing him in, but I wouldn't be selling him either. So I think what I'll do with him is, keep him. He's got a decent fixture this week and just hope that, for Game Week 12, he's not going to be suspended. And I think because of this, because of players, and we know Jesus is going to blank in 12 anyway. But obviously if he's booked, he'll blank in 12 and then he'll miss 13. So I think with any of these, if they're important for your plan for the game week blank, and I know it's going to be hard with all these injuries that are cropping up, I'll try and roll a transfer this week if possible, because if Maddison gets booked, he was going to be key for game week 12. Then you're going to have to look at other options, and I mean there are other options. I'm sure we can discuss them next week if Maddison gets that booking, but I wouldn't be buying them. I wouldn't be selling them. I'll just be very, very aware of this. If you own any of these players or you were looking to bring any of them in, they're 1 yellow card away from a ban. So then we move on to the Liverpool assets. Now, I mean, these aren't very popular at the moment, and probably for good reason. Although I wanted to discuss them because Game Week 12, obviously we've got Man City blanking and we've got Arsenal blanking. Liverpool probably got the best fixture. They're at home to West Ham. And, previously there's been some great underlying data for all of them. And I mean, there still is, even for Salah, who's not that popular. Now, we've also had the Diaz injury today. That's been announced. He's out till after the World Cup. It looks like Trent and Matic could be out a couple of weeks. And obviously Robertson has missed the last couple of games as well. So maybe as a whole, it's going to affect Liverpool. But still, they've got a great fixture. I think Salah's the best captain option in Game Week 12. And, so do the models as well. You can just log in to Fantasy Football Scout, check Rate My Team. Salah's top for Game Week 12 by quite a distance as well. Now, this Diaz injury, I think it's opened up some pretty good options. Like Darwin Núñez, his XGI is 0.9. Now, the reason I say the Diaz injury might be a good thing is while he's not going to be playing, we might see more minutes for players like Firmino, Jota, Núñez. players like that. So yeah, Nunez is at 0.9 XGI. That's per 90. Firmino is at 0.77. Jota's up at 0.68. Obviously, he's not played many minutes at all, so that's worth bearing in mind. And in the last game, he was playing slightly deeper. But again, with that Diaz injury, maybe that would change. Maybe he'd play on the left. It might be worth looking at, predicted teams. Salah is still at 0.65 XGI, so it's not up to his very, very best level. But I mean, it's not shabby at all. And I've included Diaz in this list because he was very popular at 8 million, but his XGI was only 0.38, which was only just ahead of Trent, who was 0.31. So, yeah, I mean, personally, I've got Salah. I'm going to be keeping Salah, and I'm going to be captaining him in game week 12. No matter what happens in this Man City game, if they lose 6-7-0, I'm still going to go for Salah captaincy. He might be quite tricky for a lot of teams who've been doing well in the last couple of weeks. You'll probably set up where you don't want to be bringing in Salah unless you're going to look at doing something like, and we discussed it on the Scoutcast, you could go KDB to Salah, captain Salah, reassess. If you don't like it, you can move down to Foden and you've got a load of money in the bank. Now, even as a Salah owner, honestly, Nunez is really, really tempting me. I don't know if it would be for game week 12. I mean, maybe. I've got Kane. He could come in for Kane. The same with Jota. I'm not as keen on Firmino. He's been in the league a long time, and while he's gone through little runs, where he gets braces and hat tricks, I don't feel consistently over the season he's a good asset. So Nunez and Jota would be the ones I'd be eyeing up. I mean, you could even go for a double up, and it would just make that game week 12 captaincy so much easier. If you're not super high on someone like Trossard or Maddison, players like that. I mean, Kane, he's away at Man United. So while Kane, the only time he's blanked his game week 1, are you going to want to put the armband on Kane? It's an open week for captaincy. If you don't have Salah, that is, in my opinion. So I think Nunez looks like a great option. And even as a Salah owner, I might look at going for that double up. Now, obviously, Trent's going to be a sell, but we'll get on to defenders shortly when we discuss the Reece James replacements. So, I mean, I can completely understand if you just want to ignore Liverpool, you're doing well, but I think it's really worth considering. And I mean, these numbers, especially Nunez, it's insane. 0.9 XGI, it's nothing to be sniffed at. And I mean, he could be very, very explosive in the coming weeks, especially with the fixtures they've got coming up. So for the third tip, I want to discuss the captaincy in game week 11. Now, while a lot of people may want to just ignore Liverpool assets, they may also just want to captain Haaland every single week. And I can completely get that. But I wanted to discuss the alternative. Now, I've got up here with Scout, we've got the Rate My Team section. And Son's top, followed by Kane, followed by Salah. And then Haaland's actually in 4th place, just ahead of Jesus, Martinelli and Saka, all at Arsenal. And then we got the rotation risk that is Sterling, rounding it out. Now, I mean, personally, I don't fully agree with this. I'd have Kane ahead of Son. You've got the penalties. Like I mentioned, Kane, he's not been explosive, but the last time he blanked was that game week 1 win where they put 4 past Southampton. Now, there's a few reasons I'm considering this. Obviously, Kane's projected to score more points using this. Kane's also at home. He's got that home fixture against Everton, whereas Haaland's away at Liverpool. Now, while it times in quite nicely with that section we just mentioned, Liverpool, people aren't high on Liverpool. Haaland could score against everyone. Maybe it's not the hardest fixture there is. As in, normally I'd look at Haaland, away to Liverpool, and I'd consider that to be the hardest possible fixture on paper. Now, this might not be the case. We can see here, I've got some data on screen. So Liverpool have an XG conceded per game of 1.4. Now, Everton's is worse, it's 1.6. But then when you consider how good Haaland's been, maybe we need to consider, that fixture's not as tough as it could be. Haaland over the season has an XG per game of 0.9. Whereas we're looking at Kane, he's slightly behind at 0.7. But again, not to be sniffed at. Now, I think this is going to be one where it's your risk appetite, because I mean, Kane's got everything. If Haaland didn't exist, Kane would be an easy captain this week. I think with those stats, at home to Everton, where they were keeping a few clean sheets. That was before Pickford was injured, and Pickford was playing very, very well. Now Pickford's obviously back. but he's been conceding, you know, a couple of goals. Yeah, it's a very, very borderline decision. And, you know, if you're doing well, I can understand. I normally don't like playing for EO, but I can completely understand. You know, Haaland last week was over 200% EO. Maybe he'll be a smidge down because of Kane. This is one. I mean, I personally have not made my mind up. I've got both. My original plan, and the reason I've got Kane is because I was going to captain Kane in game week 11. You know, at home to Everton. I'm not 100% on it now. So I guess to conclude this, to round it up, what I'd say is, if you want to take a risk for any reason, go for Kane. If you're feeling safe, you know, I've got no problem. You know, you going for Haaland, that's fair enough. I might even do it myself. But I think Kane, if we're just looking at numbers, ignoring effective ownership, if we're playing this game on our own, I think everything points at Kane being the best captain. He's going to be an absolutely huge differential. And we move on to the news that broke tonight. So I was going to discuss goalkeepers. I mean, goalkeepers, it's a bit of a boring topic. So I'm kind of glad something's happened. I mean, I'm not glad for my own team. I went for Reece James over Cancelo, and yeah, that obviously has not gone well. Now, first of all, I got the tweet here, just confirming it from Nizar, who's, you know, he follows Chelsea. He's a journalist, and he's reported that injury. Apparently, he was walking after the game. He walked onto the pitch. He walked off the pitch. But I mean, let's be honest. I'm not a doctor. For full disclosure. So, and I couldn't find anything else about that injury. So, it could well be. You know, we're so near the World Cup now. Maybe he's going to be out for a few games. Maybe he's going to, you know, miss the World Cup. I don't know. But it's worth having that discussion that I know we touched on briefly the other week. Now, with the Trent injury as well, it makes it more interesting. Because, I mean, while Trent is going into, you know, a tough game against Man City, he'd be quite nice to have for 12 and 13. He'd have that game at home to West Brom, and then he's got a decent run after that as well. So normally, I still would consider Trent. And I know I've been quite high on Liverpool during this video, but it's just the way I see it. So I think my initial thoughts, and I mean, this injury has only just happened. It kind of links into what we were discussing on the Scoutcast, where maybe we want to look at these cheap enablers that have a good game this week, have a good or at least decent game in the blank, and then you can hold them long term. So on the screen, I've got basically, it's the Rate My Team tool again. It's over the next 6 game weeks, and I've actually sorted these by value. Now, right at the top for value, despite his price of 6.1 million, Reece James is actually top. You've got Anderson of Palace in second, just behind. Then you've got Doherty at Tottenham. You've got Guehi, again, another Palace defender. Romero at Tottenham. Then you've got Dunk for Brighton. Saliba of Arsenal is interesting because he's got that blank. And then there's also, if you go down a couple more, it's Webster as well. So, I mean, value-wise, it really likes, you know, if you're going to sell Reece James, go in cheap, get some good value. So, you've got the Crystal Palace defenders and the Brighton defenders. Now, that's what we discussed on the Scoutcast. I think they fill in brilliantly, especially for game week 12. For me and for my team, the Brighton ones really, really do stand out. Obviously, not as an option to play every single week, but to play for the next couple, and then you have a little bit of money in your team as well. So what I like about that is you can bring a bit of money out, get in that bench fodder. Like I'm talking Dunk or Webster. They're 4.5 or 4.6 million, depending on which one you want to go for. This tool actually has Dunk projected to score more points and be better value, despite being 0.1 more. Maybe you can only afford Webster. And actually looking at Webster's, looking at both their attacking data, Dunk's is non-existent. Webster's is poor, but better. I think it's 0.1 XG per 90. So you might get a goal on average every 10 games. So you're going to be lucky to get an attacking return from either of them. But yeah, what I'd like about that is you could bring the money out of James, free up a little bit of money for the blank. But also, you want to be looking at bringing Arsenal and Man City players back straight after that blank. So game week 13, 14, we will probably want to be looking at bringing in Arsenal or Man City players. So what I like about this, you can get a bit of money to start, to do that, to build towards that. So maybe you've got someone like Zaha, who I think is a great long-term pick, But if you've downgraded Reece James all the way down to Dunk, you've got a little bit of money where you could look at moving Zaha to someone like Saka, to someone like Foden, even if they get price rises. So I think my plan at the moment, and I've got a lot of flags in my own team, would be to bring Reece James down as low as possible. Now, you could go for a Palace defender. Maybe they suit your team better. But for my team, the Brighton defenders seem to fit a lot better. And I'm very, very torn between Dunk and Webster. I think I might go Webster, actually. I noticed a few Brighton fans like Az recommending going for Webster. He's got the better attacking stats of the two, although it's very negligible. It's not pretty. And you save that 0.1 as well, and you never know when you're going to need that 0.1. My long-term plan, if you can call it that, because we've got the World Cup coming up, would be to have Webster basically on the bench most weeks. But he'd be an amazing sub to come in. If there's any injuries or anything, I'm more than happy playing a Brighton defender. So that would be my initial thought. Obviously, we can't. A lot of managers already have Cancelo. I don't have him. They've got Liverpool and then a blank. So maybe if we were in different circumstances, it would have been a nice way that I could just find find over £1 million, get Cancelo in for him. But it just doesn't seem the right circumstances. So I like coming right down. Now, Doherty's an interesting one. But I feel like with a blank coming up, do you want to risk it? He's dirt cheap. He's down to 4.6 million, and we saw what he could do last season. So I probably wouldn't risk it, not with a blank. Maybe under normal circumstances, it'd be an amazing punt at that price. Much better value than Perisic, who's frustrated, who I definitely wouldn't go for. So yeah, I'd go for a very, very boring pick here. So to sum up, I'd basically go for one of the Brighton centre-backs or one of the Crystal Palace centre-backs. So thanks for joining me today. I hope that was useful. And don't forget, probably the most important tip that I've not included is that the Gameweek 11 deadline is actually a Friday night deadline. So make sure you set your teams ahead of the Friday deadline. It's Friday evening in the UK.